Hello everyone, welcome back I hope to the Knife Edge UK YouTube channel. Please give us a subscription if you like what we're doing here, it really helps and we really appreciate it. So what are we looking at today? Well, we're looking at the Serge Panchenko Gen 2 Bean, and this is an interesting little knife and one that tends to cause a little bit of controversy when you start talking about it, because these are not cheap and these are very small. So before we go any further, let's quickly put it next to a few other knives to give you an idea of the size. So, there we go with the Gen 2, and we'll get to why it's the Gen 2 and all that kind of good stuff shortly. There it is next to a GC knife northwards on the 15 frame, the Lincoln Jack. Here's a 25 frame Northfield unexcelled in Stag there. This is a really cool little knife in Stag, that. And what else do we have? I don't know what else we should use. Oh yes, we will use a UK PK. That gives you an idea of just how small the knives we're talking about here. They are dinky, rinky dinky. And we'll do one more. We'll put the squeak in as well, albeit with some gook on its blade. So there you go. There we have it. It's a small knife. I think our point is made on that front. So let's put these guys away and get to the heart of the matter. Okay, so the Bean. Well, this is, as I say, the Bean Gen 2. The original Bean had a little flipper tab here, and you put your hand up the front here and pulled that flipper tab back, and it shot the blade out, and that was great, and it's lovely, and I've used them, and they're very nice. The blade shape on many of those wasn't really to my taste. Now, the Gen 2 has this sort of Warncliffe style. It's not quite a Warncliffe really, it's more like a sheep's foot, but you've also got some belly. It's quite a curious blade shape, but it really is to my taste. I really like it. So for me, the Gen 2 was the easy choice. Now this is a mid-tech version. These are made by Millet Knives in the States for Serge. I'm not sure if he puts them together or if he has anything to do with these ones at all. I know that he often will get these mid-tech ones and do sort of customization, you know, anno work or whatever else to the scales, and then you've got kind of semi-customized mid-tech. But this one is quite stock really. You've got titanium slab scales, as you can see, they're nice and thin. You've got a titanium pocket clip, which as you can see as well is not very deep carry, and then you have a CPM 154 blade, beloved of so many custom makers. It's a very nice steel. It lags behind your M390s, your S110Vs, your LMAXs, but not by a long way. It's good steel. It takes a beautiful edge, it's relatively easy to work with, and it does hold that edge for a decent amount of time. So yeah, let's get into this properly. As you can see, the blade is relatively thick considering how tiny this knife is, and the way that the knife actually operates is this bar here that you can see, this has a little detent ball inside it there. Is that focusing? It's not focusing. Focus! Never mind. Has a little detent ball there which runs along the blade on the inside, and that goes into two different detent points, one in the closed position obviously and one in the open position, and hopefully, as you can hear, it's got a nice satisfying sound to it. There we go, and again on the open. Yeah, really nice. And sometimes they can be a little bit soft. This one was when it arrived. It's quite easy to play around with slightly by taking this apart and just pressing that in a little bit and getting a little bit more pressure going on from that detent bar, I suppose you could think of it as. It's kind of working as a lock bar, but it never actually slots into place in the way a lock bar would. As I say, it's running along a little groove there, just being worn into the surface, this lovely surface of this steel. And this is actually running on very tiny little ball bearings. And to be honest, I really like it. It's very smooth, it just works really nicely. And that brings me on, talking about really nice things, to my favourite thing about this knife. Incidentally, that's where the lockup actually happens. The stop pin is this little nut in the top. My favourite thing about this knife is the grind. Now, I think I'm right in saying that that's very slightly hollow, and it is incredibly thin behind the edge. This is one of the thinnest knives behind the edge that I have in my collection anywhere, including all the traditionals. It's beautifully ground, so Millet did an amazing job on that. And to say that the stock isn't terribly thin, if I grab something like this is a 14 pattern Lick Creek boys knife here, traditional, as you can see, The thickness of that's relatively substantial. It's for the size of knife. You've certainly got some steel there, and this still slices like a demon. Sure, it's not a food prep knife by any means, but it works so well in almost every other way. It's got this sort of heavy kind of apocalyptic stonewash throughout the whole thing, which I really like. It's sort of an acid wash kind of vibe, and it works really, really nicely. There's no arguments there. Overall, I'm just a big fan. It's also lovely and light. Downsides. Oh, incidentally, there's a little blue titanium standoff in there as well. Downsides, well, obviously, this is not God's gift to hard use. It's not really meant for that, and I certainly wouldn't judge it by that. That's by the by as far as I'm concerned. When it comes to opening packages or, whatever else, or clamshells or cutting the odd zip tie or anything like that, this will do the job for you. So if this is in your pocket, no problem at all. It opens really, really nicely as well. It's lovely. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting all over the place here. Real downsides. Well, you have here this relatively shallow carry pocket clip. It's a bent titanium pocket clip. It's lovely and tight. And I have to say that it sticks out the pocket, a fair amount, it actually feels quite secure in the pocket and hasn't been a problem. And one of the main things I would say is that you can just unscrew this. It's got sort of straightforward torques in it, and you could just have this as a floating pocket knife like you would any traditional knife. And it's actually slimmer than most traditional, so it should be very, very inconspicuous and no problem at all in the pocket. Centering, incidentally, is really nice on this. So really, I don't have a huge problem with that. Any other substantial issues? Well, it's not the most ergonomic knife in the world. It's quite small. It actually, whereas with a 25 pattern GC, I can get, because I've got relatively small hands, I can actually get a 4-finger grip on a 25 pattern. Don't check at home. I've got small hands, all right? It's fine. Let's not talk about that. Anyway, so with this one, I don't actually quite get that. It is a 3-finger knife for me. And my major problem with it is one thing, which is that whereas you have, and people don't often talk about this, I don't think, I'm not really sure why, on a traditional knife, you have a kick. And it actually serves as a tiny little finger guard, because when you try and close the knife, your finger interacts with the kick, and you've actually got loads of control over the blade of the knife just from your thumb and forefinger. And that's really, really useful. It's not only a safety feature, because if the back of the knife gets knocked, it doesn't end up with the edge in your finger. It's also something else. It just makes the whole process more comfortable, and it gives you an indexing feel. Now with this knife, you have this little piece here, which you feel like should provide the same thing, but because of the finish and the fact that it's so beautifully rounded, and it is really, really nicely done, all the chamfering on this is great, the knife just slips straight past, and you get impaled very, very quickly on where the sharpening choil is. And interestingly, the sharpening choil on this is really, really good. It comes well past the plunge grind. Great work, fantastic. But I just wish, obviously this is not a hard use knife, but I just wish that little kick, something was there, whether it was a tiny little flare out or just something as simple as some jimping along there so that it gripped your finger instead of just sliding straight through. Serge is a great designer, and he has a great eye for design, and I guess that would probably throw that a little bit, and I can understand why, with that in mind, he might not want to faff around with the lines of the knife for that reason, but it does just pose a bit of a question for me. And indeed, I absolutely love his new slip joint design. If you go online at the moment and look at any of his pages, you'll see he has a beautiful new slip joint he's producing with micarta handles and an absolutely, it's just a gorgeous blade. But I do wonder and worry that it will have exactly the same problem as this one has from that point of view, and actually won't be as confidence-inducing to use as even just a classic traditional is. That's before we talk about Spydercos with choils and what have you. So that is one downside to this knife. The other big downside is the price, and that's the first thing that will get everyone hot under the collar the moment you talk about these knives. And I can understand that, and I think part of that is because this knife has been mercilessly cloned by Chinese manufacturers. There are so many clones of this in the cleaver blade shape, the original, Gen 1 blade shape. I haven't seen many in this Gen 2 blade shape, but I'm sure they're out there. And they generally, one of the best ways, and Serge actually told me this, one of the best ways to differentiate is they normally have the steel marked on them somewhere, and Serge's don't. And I'm sure there are other, little key giveaways and what have you. This is a genuine one. But they are very expensive, no question at all. For such a small knife, I mean, you're looking, I think I'm right in saying they're about $350 when purchased directly from Serge via the little sort of drops he does on his website. And yeah, you know what? That's a very expensive little knife, and I certainly expected before I had this in hand to have a lot to say about how overpriced I felt it was. But it's so well made. Look, the materials don't add up to the cost. I think that's fair, and some of the manufacturing probably doesn't either. But you're paying for the designer to buy something directly by that designer that's got a very sort of instant aesthetic look. You're looking to put money in the designer's pocket rather than in the pocket of someone who's cloned the knife. And I don't know, with how the main thing that sells me on it is how beautifully ground the blade is. If the blade had been even remotely thick behind the edge, maybe I'd be singing a different tune right now. But with how well this is ground and how usable it is and how nice it is to carry and how pretty I think it is, I really struggle to rail on it, to be honest. I really, really like it. The Bean Gen 2 is my favourite of the bunch, and you know what? I'd buy a full custom, although now he's released that slip joint. Anyway, right guys, that is the Bean Gen 2 from Serge Panchenko. Hope you enjoyed this video. Sorry it's a slightly long one. I'll catch you at the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.